All right, let's get right into it. You'd think that if you dial back a huge machine, say a coal power plant, its pollution would drop. I mean, that's just common sense, right? Less power, less pollution. Well, it turns out it's not always that simple. A really cool scientific study dug into one specific plant and found something totally unexpected, a real paradox, and we're going to unpack it. So here's the big question, the central mystery we're tackling. Researchers were looking at this one place, the Barappukeria thermal power plant, and they noticed something wild. When the plant wasn't running at full blast, when it throttled down, one of its main pollutants didn't just stay the same, it went through the roof. It absolutely skyrocketed. So what in the world is happening inside that furnace to make that happen?
Okay, just look at the data here. It's pretty stark. At 100% power, the plant is kicking out about 381 parts per million of nitrogen oxides. We just call that NOx. But get this, when they cut the power load in half, down to 50%, that number doesn't go down. It jumps all the way to 974. That is more than double the pollution for half the power. It makes no sense. And that, right there, is the paradox we're talking about.
Now you might be thinking, okay, that's a weird science quirk, but why does it really matter? Well, to get that, we've got to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about one single power plant, this is about the energy future for an entire country.
And this number, 27%, is exactly why it matters so much. By 2025, coal is expected to generate over a quarter of all of Bangladesh's electricity. Think about that. For a country that's growing and developing so quickly, figuring out how to manage coal power isn't just a nice-to-have, it's absolutely critical.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem, doesn't it? On one hand, the Barappukeria plant is pumping out electricity that people desperately need. But on the other hand, that NOx pollution, that stuff contributes to acid rain, nasty smog, and real respiratory problems for people. So, figuring out why these weird pollution spikes happen, well, it's not an academic exercise. It's vital for protecting the environment and people's health.
So that brings up a huge practical problem. How in the world do you study what's happening inside a furnace that's burning at like 2200 Kelvin without shutting down a power plant that an entire country relies on? Well, the answer is pretty cool. You build a virtual one on a computer.
What these scientists did was create what's called a digital twin. It's basically an ultra-detailed computer model of the power plant that acts and reacts just like the real deal. And this is a game changer because it let them run tons of experiments, tweak all the settings, and basically look inside that raging furnace in a way you could never, ever do in real life.
The tech that makes this all possible has a fancy name, computational fluid dynamics, or CFD for short. And a great way to think about it is like this. Imagine a superpowered weather forecast, but instead of predicting wind and rain, it's modeling the insane, chaotic, fiery dance of gases and chemical reactions swirling around inside that boiler. It's incredibly powerful, and it's the key that lets us solve this whole mystery.
Okay, so before we can really understand what the computer model told us, we need to meet our main suspects. See, it turns out that NOx isn't just one single bad guy. It's more like a family of culprits, and each one is formed in a totally different way. All right, first up in our lineup, we've got thermal NOx. This one's pretty easy to understand. When things get really, really hot inside that furnace, we're talking over 1800 Kelvin, the nitrogen that's just naturally in the air gets cooked, basically, and turns into NOx. Simple rule, the hotter it is, the more thermal NOx you get.
Next up, suspect number 2, prompt NOx. Now this one is a bit different. It forms super fast, right at the very edge of the flame itself. It's all happening in that split second where the fuel molecules are being ripped apart by the fire. It's a quick, complex reaction that happens right in the flame.
And our third and final culprit is fuel NOx. Just like the name suggests, this stuff comes directly from the fuel. The coal itself actually has nitrogen chemically bound up inside of it. So when you burn the coal, that nitrogen gets released and boom, it combines with oxygen to create even more NOx.
So let's just quickly recap, because this is really important. You've got thermal NOx, which is all about one thing, intense heat. Then you have fuel and prompt NOx, which are much more about the nitty-gritty chemistry of the flame and the nitrogen that's already baked into the coal. And understanding that difference, well, that's the key to cracking this whole case.
Okay, the stage is set. We have our crime scene, the inside of that furnace. We have our lineup of suspects, the 3 types of NOx. And we have our high-tech detective, that CFD computer model. Now it's time to put all the clues together and solve this thing.
So, The computer simulation spit out two absolutely critical pieces of information about what happens when the plant powers down. First, the temperature drops. No surprise there, right? It goes from a peak of around 2200 Kelvin down to 1850. But the second thing it found, this is the clincher. The amount of time the gases hang around inside the furnace, what scientists call residence time, it more than doubles.
Now that big drop in temperature, it does exactly what you'd think. It slashes the amount of thermal NOx being created. That's our high heat suspect, remember? So you'd think, great, problem solved. Pollution goes down. But that's not the whole story. Not even close.
This right here, this is the smoking gun. 23.3 seconds. At half power, the hot gases are just lingering inside that furnace for over 23 seconds. Now that might not sound like a long time, but in the world of high-speed chemical reactions, that is an eternity.
And there it is. That's the solution to the whole paradox. That massively longer time, that residence time, it gives our other two culprits, the fuel NOx from the coal and the prompt NOx from the flame, way more time to form. And they form in such huge amounts that the increase completely blows past the little bit of reduction we got from the lower temperature. It's not even a contest.
And this final data from the simulation just lays it all out clear as day. Look at the columns. As the power load goes down, the residence time goes up, and the total NOx pollution coming out the other end goes way up right along with it. It's a direct link, and it's the exact opposite of what you'd naturally expect.
So, okay, we've solved the puzzle. But this isn't just some neat science fact. This discovery has some really big, real-world consequences for how we manage our electricity and, the air we breathe.
So what's the bottom line here? What are the big takeaways? Well, first, and this is a huge one, you can't just throttle down a coal plant and pat yourself on the back for being green. You could actually be making the pollution problem way worse. That means the folks who run our power grids have an incredibly complicated job. They're not just balancing electricity demand, they have to juggle these super complex and bizarre pollution dynamics too. And finally, it just goes to show, if we want to make smart policies about the environment, we can't just skim the surface. We have to understand the messy, detailed chemistry of what's actually happening.
The researchers who did this study summed it up perfectly. They said, the results highlighted that the NOx emissions are highly dependent on the flame temperature and the staging of air and fueling under various operational conditions. What that really means is that it's all a delicate balancing act. It's a dance between temperature, air, fuel, and time. And if you change just one of those things, the whole picture can change dramatically.
And all this really leaves us with one last big question to think about. We depend on these incredibly complex machines every single day, but we tend to think about them in really simple ways. This one study uncovered a hidden pollution problem that nobody expected. So as we move into a future with more fluctuating power from renewables and constantly changing energy needs, it really makes you wonder, how many other of these hidden paradoxes are just waiting to be discovered inside the technology that runs our world?